thank you everyone for entering so great today. Welcome. We are continuing with some DNA and some fun biology today. So grab your science binders. You have your normal 2 minutes to go ahead and start on the learning goals and behavioral goals for today. So go ahead and get started on that. We'll get attendance in. I'm going to start the timer for you. So every day in class we have a very structured routine depending on the technology available. Students in our school here, we do not have a one-to-one ratio of technology. So previous to this I had a science binder or interactive notebook type binder, and we would use papers weekly to document our learning goals and behavior goals, and then we would review them at the end of the week. So we're still using that. If in a school district where the students all had their own individual devices, we would be able to possibly do this in a different format. Following the learning goals, we always go over them verbally. So today we're going to explain that every organism requires a set of instructions. So think about that. You guys are in a middle school, junior high. You receive instructions all day long. Everything that you operate and manipulate has a set of instructions. And then our behavior goals today. So we're going to do a little communication throughout some of our activities. So we're going to practice talking and listening to our partners, our group members. And then we're also going to get up once or twice maybe and move around the classroom. And when we move, we're going to move with a purpose based on the direction. And we're going to be aware of what's around us as we're moving. Okay? Any questions? And then in this time I would have taken attendance and submitted that in as well. So now we would move on to our bell work. And here we do have our document camera and projector. Our bell work would be recorded within our science binder or interactive notebook. If I was in a classroom with computers, I would like to call it a personal database for science, or come up with a clever name such as that. For this lesson, our bell work is going to be reading the following text message codes and writing what you think that they mean. Again, this is a timed activity, so I would set the timer. Approximately 1 minute for this activity. So I would like the students to know that during bell work, it's mostly an attention grabber, so they can't get them wrong. It's something that they think about. I would circulate the classroom and make sure everyone was on task and see if there were any questions. So following the conclusion of the timer, we would start to review the bell work. So I would ask if anyone had anything to share. If no one responded or we addressed any concerns, then I would ask in each group, most of our classrooms have groups of 4. So I would ask partner number 1 to share their answers with partner number 2. And also number 3 to talk with number 4 to share their bell work and see if they had any questions or wanted to review their answers. I would set the timer again for that. And when the timer went off, we would go ahead and review them together. Students like to give their input usually for these types of questions. So we would go through the bell work message codes. So we all know the answers. Let me know when we're texting someone. I know, right? Laugh out loud. It's up to you, and 143 is I love you. So I would then address the students with some questions to try to grab some attention. Why are we talking about these text message codes? What do they have to do with everything we've been talking about as far as science goes? We've been talking about parts of cells, we've been talking about heredity and parents and offspring and reproduction. So I would ask the students to think about this throughout class. What do codes made from letters have to do with what we've been talking about? And so we would have some wait time and have some questions there. And we would then put away our bell work as standard for every day. So next, we would go right into our lesson. So our lesson for today, always going back to the learning goal, every organism requires a set of instructions. So we have codes, we have instructions. These are our words that keep coming up at us today. So we're going to start with an an anticipation guide. I'm going to go ahead and put it up on the projector for you all to see in just a moment, but each student would have one already, either delivered to their personal computer, online on my site that they could grab, or on the table as a piece of paper. So there was multiple modalities for them to be able to access that. In our classroom here, we're using the document camera. So this is our anticipation and reflection guide. Students are used to how this works. We do use them quite a bit. At the beginning of class, they are trained to anticipate what the lesson might be about. So I would definitely go over this verbally with the students so that everyone understood directions. Different learning styles may need to hear the directions. Others can read the directions. If different language was needed, we could have that read via our assistive technology. Or I would read that via assistive technology. So here we're beginning with a statement. DNA provides the recipe for making our body proteins. The pattern of the bases forms the double helix ladder shape of DNA and is the code for steps to make genes. And then I would say, raise your hands if that confuses you. That's a long statement with some big words. So we would like to break down that statement. We would possibly like to go over, I would have the students circle in any color they wanted to, any words that stuck out there that they were unsure of. And then we would take a moment, we would think, pair, share. This time I would switch partners. Number 2 would work with number 3, number 1 would work with number 4. They would have 1 minute with a timer to possibly discuss and learn from each other what they think that statement means in their own words. No right or wrong. We're thinking, we're processing. So following this explanation and discussion, we would then move down to the statements. So once again, we would read them out loud to the students. They could also read them to themselves or listen to them, depending on their learning needs. So the directions are to read each statement and mark a check in the agree column if they agree with the statement, or if they disagree, mark a check there as well. But the extra piece is I'm asking them to please put a reason why you checked that. And I would like to give them examples of reasons. They can put, you guys, if you don't know the reason why you're saying I agree with this statement, then say, I'm just guessing, just a guess. If you think it was a vocabulary word that you heard last week, put, I think that was a vocabulary word. Maybe you came across that in something you read online. Anywhere, anything that you can think of that helped you make your decision. Not right, not wrong. So I would then set the timer. We would have a certain amount of time, probably 3 to 5 minutes depending on the class, to go ahead and complete that activity. I would circulate throughout the room to provide individual assistance. And following the conclusion of this, we would do a full table think, pair, share. I would again set the timer, and the students would get to talk about each statement with their partners at their table. Again, giving me the opportunity to walk around and listen. What misconceptions am I hearing? What redirection can I possibly offer? What other knowledge or questions might I hear that the students would want to know? So following this completion, after the group activity and my circulation, we would kind of go over this. Kind of just think about it, talk about it. I would ask maybe some class-wide questions. We could also ask the groups to come up with at least one question that we could address as well. So then I would ask them to go ahead and put this down and look back up at me, and we would turn this off, and we would once again come back to our learning goal. Every organism requires a set of instructions. And how do we explain this? What does this mean? So thus far, we have done a couple of activities. We've looked at text message codes based on letters in an alphabet, and we've done an anticipation guide to help us remember some of the things we've talked about and possibly predict what we would be learning next that would relate to these codes and our learning target. Here we would open our computer, or here we would open our textbook. we would go to our section on base pairs. I would ask the students to allow me to introduce the section. And I would like to use this structure and model. So we would bring in modeling all the time. DNA is too small for us to see. So in science, again, we often use models or digital simulations to help us understand these structures. So this is our first day with this DNA structure. And I would ask the students to brainstorm. What does this look like? What shape does it remind you of? What do the colors possibly represent? We would have a short discussion. And then we would return to our textbook or the digital simulation that I had picked out for them to experience and manipulate a piece of DNA. Khan Academy has a 5 to 10 minute, and then our Fusion textbooks also have a section on this that we would peruse through. So following a short bit of text interaction, I would tell the students that we would get to play somewhat of a game. So I would walk around to each student and I would drop off 4 pieces of paper at their table. So on each piece of paper is a letter. Obviously the others are A and T. So each student in the group would take one of the pieces of paper. So I would ask them now, our movement time has come. We've done some really good analyzation. We've done a little bit of reading of textbook. What can we learn from that? What do these letters mean? Well, right away we have students who are ready. Oh, base pairs, we have some feedback, some interaction. So this is where we tie everything together. I want the students to stand up at their desks and hold their letter. I would model for them first. I am letter A. Based on what I have learned through my simulation, through my textbook and resources, what do I do with the letter A? Who is letter A's partner to make its code? And then we would get student feedback. I would provide clarification. And I would say, in 5 seconds, anyone who pairs with letter A should move to a certain corner of the room. Most of the corners of the room have a marker, like a red, a blue, a green, a yellow. So all A's move to the red. So then I would ask the students to predict whose partner is the A. How does it make a code? The other students would then be responsible for figuring out what letter moves with the A's. So the end result would be the A's and T's would move together, the C's and G's would move together. So there we would be practicing movement with purpose, movement with awareness. Here I'm just facilitating. I'm facilitating number 1, do the students know what letters go together? Do they pay attention to the short 5 or 10 minute activity we did with a textbook or with a computer simulation building the DNA? That would allow me to see who's grasping the basic content of matching of the letters. Would also allow me to walk around and watch their movement with purpose, evaluating social skills. So following, when our timer goes off for that, I would then send the signal that we use to move back to our desks, and the students would come back to their desks. We try to keep all those signals the same every class, every day. Once back at their desk, I would ask them, do you have any feedback? Do you have any questions on this activities? We would go ahead and discuss those. Then I would go into the conclusion of the day. So the conclusion I would wrap up verbally, so I'm talking a lot more here than I think that I would be during this activity in class or that I have done before. To conclude the day, we would tie these things together. How do codes have to do with what we're learning about DNA? And what do these letters mean? And we would bring up our new vocabulary, base pairs, and then we would identify what the letters mean based on the knowledge we have gained. So the students were exposed to what we had done previously. They were allowed some movement and some interaction within their groups, and then they also were introduced to new vocabulary words. So if time allowed, we would then, or tomorrow, we would build on this, we would add these new words to our interactive word walls that you would be able to see throughout the classroom. Our exit slip for today would be to pull back out your anticipation guide. spend the last 3 to 5 minutes, and we would take a different color, and we would take 1 minute to ourselves, 1 to 2 minutes to ourselves, and we would modify. Take a different color and make any changes on this sheet that you could. Do you want to change where your check mark is? Do you want to change your piece of evidence for your reason? Following that 2 minutes, we would then share with our group for a final time. And we would then organize our binder or save our anticipation guide in the proper location in our computer or iPad. And then we will pack our things up, make sure we had everything around. We would answer any final questions. And before everyone went, usually like the last 1 or 2 minutes of class, I like to bring their attention right back here to the learning goals and behavior goals. We read them again, and we discuss right before we leave. How did we do personal evaluations? How did our classroom community do today? And think about some improvements, or give ourselves a round of applause. And then I would let them out the door as the time expired, and look forward to seeing them tomorrow.